So what if I told you that a computer could actually be alive? I'm not talking about some sci-fi movie. I'm talking about living, learning brain cells grown right in a laboratory dish. Today, we're going to dive into this incredible world of biological computers and find out how scientists are literally teaching these tiny living brains to control robots and interact with our world.
Okay, so why is this such a huge deal? Well, it all comes down to one thing: power. Your brain right now is running on about 20 watts. That's less than a dim light bulb. Now compare that to a powerful AI, something that might run a self-driving car. That can burn through kilowatts of power. It's this absolutely staggering energy efficiency that has scientists so fascinated with what they call biological neural networks, or BNNs. They don't just compute differently, they do it with an efficiency that our best silicon chips can only dream of.
All right, so how do we get from a few cells in a dish to an intelligence that can drive a robot? Well, here's our roadmap. First, we're going to look at the brain in the dish itself. Then, we'll see how you build the cyborg connection to actually talk to it. From there, we'll check out what happens when these neurons are in the driver's seat, which all leads up to the amazing story of how they were taught to play a video game. And finally, we'll take a peek at what's next for this incredible living tech.
So let's start with section 1, a brain in a dish. To even begin to understand how you build a biological computer, you've got to start small, really small, with a fundamental building block of all thought: the neuron. You can think of a single neuron as a tiny little organic processor. See, it's got these inputs called dendrites that gather up signals. Then the main cell body, the soma, it kind of acts like a little decision maker, adding up all that input. And if it gets excited enough, bam! It fires its own signal down its one output wire, the axon, to go talk to the next neuron in the chain. But here, this is where the real magic happens. The connections between the neurons, the synapses, they aren't set in stone. Their strength can actually change over time. This is called synaptic plasticity, and it's the biological secret sauce for, well, everything. It's how these networks learn, how they adapt, and how they form memories. A stronger connection just means information flows more easily. And you know, the language they speak is unbelievably simple. It's all based on these things called action potentials, or just spikes. It's an all or nothing signal. The neuron either fires or it doesn't. It's a biological 1 or a 0. Now, on its own, one little spike doesn't mean much. But when you get thousands, even hundreds of thousands of these tiny processors firing in complex patterns, that's when intelligence starts to emerge.
And this is the part that just blows my mind. You don't have to sit there and painstakingly wire these neurons together one by one. Researchers can just take neurons, put them in a dish with some nutrients, and they do the rest themselves. They literally self-organize. They reach out, they form synapses, and they create a living, spiking, totally functional network. A literal brain in a dish.
Okay, so we've got our miniature brain, but it's isolated, right? It's just floating in a dish. To do anything useful, it needs a body. It needs a way to sense the world and a way to act on it. And that brings us to section 2, building that cyborg connection.
The whole setup works like a continuous feedback loop. It kicks off when the robot's sensors see something in the world. That digital data gets translated into electrical pulses that stimulate the neurons. The BNN then does its thing, it thinks about it, and its response is recorded and decoded back into a command for the robot. Like turn left. The robot moves, its sensors see something new, and the whole cycle just keeps going. It's a constant conversation. So, how do we actually translate between the robot world and the brain world? Well, to talk to the BNN, scientists use these tiny microelectrodes to send in very precise electrical pulses. And to listen back to the BNN, those exact same electrodes can record the electrical spikes that the neurons fire out. So we have a genuine two-way interface between a machine and living tissue. It's wild. All right, so we've got a living brain and a way to talk to it. What if we actually managed to do with these neural robotic systems? Well, the progress over the last couple of decades is really something to see. I mean, you can see the field has been building on itself for over 20 years. It started way back in 2001 with just showing basic learning was possible. By 2007, a BNN could actually control a robotic drawing arm. Fast forward to 2016, and they were learning how to track objects. And then, in 2021, came the big one. A BNN learned to play the video game Pong. Let's just take a quick look at an early example, like obstacle avoidance. So imagine a little robot's proximity sensor gets close to a wall.
That would trigger an electrical buzz in one part of the neural network. Let's call it the sensory area. The BNN would process that signal and then fire off neurons in a different motor area. And that activity would get decoded to tell the robot's wheels to turn away from the wall. So simple, but so profound.
And that brings us to the experiment that really it captured everyone's imagination. In 2021, researchers showed that a culture of neurons could learn to play the classic arcade game, Pong. And the way they did it was by tapping into a principle that's fundamental to all living things. The training method was based on this really mind-bending idea called the free energy principle. Now, it's super complex, but the core idea is actually pretty intuitive. Living things hate surprises. Any self-organizing system, from you and me all the way down to these cells in a dish, will instinctively try to act in ways that make its world more predictable and less chaotic. As this quote says, the system will actively try to change its environment to reduce its own prediction mistakes. In other words, it learns to avoid stuff it can't anticipate. So the big question is, how on earth do you use that basic instinct to teach a dish of neurons how to hit a digital ball with a digital paddle?
The solution was just genius. Every single time the BNN successfully moved the paddle to hit the ball, it got a nice, orderly, predictable electrical pulse. But every time it missed, it got blasted with chaotic, random, totally unpredictable electrical noise. That random signal is the surprise. So, to make its world less surprising, to make things more predictable, the BNN had to learn to control the paddle to hit the ball. It literally learned to play the game to create a more stable reality for itself. A dish of cells playing Pong is an absolutely incredible milestone, but it's really just the beginning. This opens up a whole new frontier. So the question is, where does this technology go from here? Well, the road ahead is full of huge challenges, but also amazing opportunities. Scientists are now working to build these networks in 3 dimensions to make them act more like a real brain. They're also figuring out how to design custom circuits for specific jobs, create way faster brain-robot interfaces, and of course, discover even better ways to teach these living intelligences. And this is really the thought I want to leave you with. This research is about so much more than just a new kind of computer. When you see 800,000 neurons in a dish learning to play Pong just to make their world more predictable, it forces you to ask some really deep questions. It challenges our entire understanding of what it means to learn, what it means to perceive, and maybe even what it means to be aware. The living computer isn't just a machine, it's a mirror.